A phone sits face up on a table. No one is touching it. The screen is dark. No app is open that you can see. And as far as you are concerned, it is doing nothing at all. But inside it, a handful of tiny sensors are awake, and each one is reporting a stream of numbers that is very slightly, very stubbornly its own. That drift is unique to this phone. Quietly, on a table, doing nothing, it is broadcasting a signature that belongs to it and almost nothing else. We spent a whole season on the question of how a device gives itself away. The canvas it draws, the fonts it lists, the audio it rounds off. This is the same story told one layer lower, in the physical parts you never think about. The little chips that feel the world move, what the motion sensor is. Modern phones are full of sensors that have nothing to do with the camera or the microphone. Three of them matter most here. The accelerometer feels how the phone is being pushed and pulled, including the constant pull of gravity. The gyroscope feels how the phone is turning. The magnetometer feels the Earth's magnetic field, which is how your Maps app knows which way you are facing. These three are the reason your screen rotates when you tilt the phone, the reason a step counter works, the reason a game knows you are steering by leaning. They are small, cheap, and they run almost all the time. And they are the parts of your phone that are quietly the easiest to read. It helps to know how small they actually are. These are not delicate scientific instruments bolted into your phone. They are tiny mechanical structures etched into a chip, sometimes called MEMS sensors, with little beams and weights that flex by a fraction of a hair when the phone moves. A circuit measures how much they flex and turns that into a number. The whole thing is smaller than a grain of rice, costs a few cents, and is stamped out by the millions. The imperfection in the silicon. Here is the thing about making millions of these sensors. No two come off the line exactly alike. They are carved out of silicon at a scale where a few atoms here or there changes the result. And no factory in the world can make them all identical. So every sensor has a small built-in error. When the phone is lying perfectly still, the accelerometer does not report a clean zero on the axis it should. It reports a tiny bias, a hair off in one direction. The gyroscope, sitting motionless, claims the phone is rotating just a little when it is not. These errors are mistakes from the factory's point of view, and they are too small to matter for any normal use, but they are consistent. The same chip makes the same small mistake in the same direction every time you read it. That consistency is the whole story. There is more than one kind of flaw, too, which is part of why this works so well. There is the offset, the wrong number when the phone is still. There is the scaling error, where the sensor reports a movement as slightly larger or smaller than it really was. And there is the way each axis can be tilted a touch relative to the others, so a pure sideways push leaks a little into the up and down reading. Each of these is its own small accident of manufacturing, and each one is stable, and together they make the picture richer. Turning a flaw into a fingerprint. If a sensor's error were random, it would be useless for identifying anything. The power comes from the fact that it is stable. Read the accelerometer a few thousand times while the phone is still, average out the shaking and the noise, and what is left is a fixed little offset that belongs to this particular chip. Do that across all three axes, across the accelerometer and the gyroscope together, and you have a small set of numbers that describe the manufacturing accent of this one device. Another phone of the exact same model, bought the same day from the same shelf, will have a different set. Not wildly different, just different enough. And that is all a fingerprint needs to be. Not a secret code stored somewhere, just a pattern that is rare enough to pick one device out of a very large crowd. How the crowd shrinks. Think about it the way we have talked about fingerprinting all season. You do not need any single number to be unique. You need the combination of them to be rare, and rare adds up fast. One sensor's bias might match a few thousand other phones. Add a second sensor and you are down to a handful. Add the gyroscope's drift, the way the readings respond at different temperatures, the tiny scaling errors on each axis, and the pool of phones that match all of it at once collapses toward one. Each measurement is another filter, and each filter throws away the devices that do not share your particular flaws, the part with no lock on it. Now for the part that makes this matter. On most phones, reading the camera needs your permission. Reading the microphone needs your permission. Reading your location needs your permission. With a prompt you have seen 100 times, the motion sensors, for a long time, needed none of that. they were treated as harmless. A web page, just an ordinary page in your browser, could ask the phone for its motion data and start receiving a stream of accelerometer and gyroscope readings without ever asking you, without any prompt, without anything you would notice. An app could do the same in the background. The assumption baked into the system was that knowing how a phone is tilting could not possibly hurt anyone. That assumption was wrong. The same stream that tells a game you are leaning also carries the chip's fixed little error, and that error is the fingerprint. So a page you visit for 10 seconds can, in principle, sample enough motion data to recognize your specific phone the next time it sees it, on a completely different site, with no cookie and no login involved. What else? The motion tells. The device fingerprint is only the first thing those sensors give away. The same numbers describe how the phone is moving, and movement says a lot about the person holding it. A step counter is the obvious one. The rhythmic bounce of walking shows up clearly in accelerometer data, so the motion stream quietly counts your steps whether you asked it to or not. The way you walk, your gait, has its own rhythm, stable enough that researchers have used it on its own to tell one person from another. It goes finer than that. When you type on a phone screen, every tap jolts the device a tiny amount, and the gyroscope feels it. The pattern of those little jolts can hint at roughly where on the screen you are tapping, which can leak a rough sense of what you are typing. It is not a clean readout of your messages. It is a smudged statistical guess, but it is more than nothing, and it comes from a sensor nobody thought to lock. The same data can sketch the rest of your day in outline. It can tell whether you are sitting still, walking, in a car, or on a train, because each of those leaves a different signature in the motion. It can notice when you pick the phone up and when you set it down. None of that is precise tracking on its own, but stacked together, it becomes a quiet diary of how a body moves through a day, written by a chip that was only ever meant to rotate the screen. Riding inside the season. If you have followed this season, you can see where this fits. Browser fingerprinting. Read the software your device exposes. This reads the hardware itself, the physical chips, one layer below the operating system, and it joins up with everything else. A motion fingerprint can be one more signal stacked alongside your screen size, your fonts, your graphics rendering, deepening a profile that already follows you. It is also stubborn in a way software signals are not. You can change your browser, clear your storage, reinstall everything, and the chip in your hand still makes the same small mistake it always did. The accent does not wash out with the software. How this gets defended? The good news is that the people who design phones and browsers noticed the defenses come in a few shapes, and they are worth understanding honestly. The first is permission. The obvious fix is to stop treating motion data as harmless and put it behind the same kind of gate as the camera. Browsers moved in this direction, so that a page wanting your motion sensors now generally has to ask, and on many phones the fire hose of silent readings has been narrowed to a trickle. The easy, invisible version of this got harder. The second is to add noise. Instead of handing back the raw sensor values, the phone or browser can round them off, blur them, or mix in a little random jitter before anything outside gets to read them. The goal is to bury the chip's fixed bias under enough deliberate fuzz that it can no longer be measured cleanly. If the real offset is tiny and the added noise is larger, the fingerprint gets much harder to pull out. The third is to cut the sampling rate. A lot of these measurements need fast, frequent readings to average out the noise and find the bias underneath. Slow the readings down, hand the page a coarser, less frequent stream, and you starve the technique of the precision it needs. There is a fourth move that is less about settings and more about design. Some phone makers calibrate the sensors at the factory and correct for the worst of the bias before any app ever sees the numbers. If the phone quietly subtracts out its own known offset, the most obvious part of the fingerprint disappears before it can leak. It does not erase every flaw, but it sands down the sharpest edge of the signal, where the defenses run out. It would be dishonest to call any of that a clean fix. Each defense has a matching limit, and the limits are real. Permission prompts only work if the data is actually gated, and there is a tension at the heart of it. Motion sensors are genuinely useful, for games, for fitness, for the screen rotating the right way, so locking them down too hard breaks things people want. Every gap left open for legitimate use is a gap a fingerprint can ride through. Noise has its own problem. If the jitter is small, the stable bias can sometimes still be recovered by averaging over enough samples, because the real signal is consistent and the noise is not. If the jitter is large enough to truly hide the bias, it often distorts the readings enough to annoy the apps that need them. A noise that follows a predictable pattern can itself become something to measure. This is the same shape we have seen all season. These are trade-offs, not victories. Anyone who tells you a setting makes your hardware perfectly anonymous is promising something the physics does not allow, because the flaw being measured is baked into the silicon and cannot simply be turned off. The hardware has an accent, so here is where it lands. You can change everything you choose, the apps, the browser, the accounts, the network. But you did not choose the precise way your accelerometer leans when it should read 0, or the exact drift in your gyroscope, or the small scaling error on each axis. Those came with the chip, set the day it was made, and they do not change because you want them to. That is what makes them so much like a fingerprint and so unlike a password. A password is something you know and can replace. This is something your device simply is. The same way two people reading the same sentence sound different because of where they grew up. Two identical phones reporting the same stillness sound different because of how they were built. The hardware has an accent, and the accent is hard to fake and hard to hide. A still phone on a table, broadcasting that accent to anything patient enough to listen, is the quiet image to live with. It is not doing anything you can see. It is just being exactly, measurably itself. If pulling the modern internet apart like this is your kind of thing, the quiet machinery under the things we all carry around without thinking, then you are in the right place. There are no products here, just the systems explained by someone who has spent a long time inside them. Subscribe and follow the rabbit hole. Next time we step back from the device and look at the companies, data brokers, the businesses that quietly buy, merge and resell the scattered pieces of who you are until they hold a profile you never agreed to assemble. How they get the pieces, how they fit them together, and how a picture of you ends up for sale to people you will never meet. That is the next room down.